Right. Hi. I'm hoping that people do see this because I realised I had a bit of a hiccup in terms of advertising that we were going live today. But so I'm hoping if you're not on live, then you do catch up with the replay. Um, I'm For those who don't know, I'm Yoni Joe, and I'm a adoption coach, a social worker, and I'm also an adopter myself. Adopted two girls who are now 20 and 19, um, and really pleased to have you join us. I'll let Keeley introduce herself.
Yeah. Hi, folks. I'm Keeley. I'm a biological mum of two small children, and I am a child therapist. I've mainly been using play therapy for over 14 years now. So I'm sure it goes fast. um,
And what we wanted to talk to everyone about today is about play therapy. But I also wanted to just take the opportunity. If you haven't listened to the podcast, we were very pleased to be guests on yesterday. Please do listen. It was a really nice chat. Al and Scott are really lovely guys. They have been running that podcast for I think 8 or 9 years now, talking about everything adoption. They're both adopters themselves, and it's quite an interesting conversation. So do give it a shot if you've got some time. Um, so today we're talking about play therapy, and quite a lot of adopters, I'm sure, will have considered it or perhaps have children who've um, engaged in some sessions of play therapy. And we thought it would be a really good opportunity to talk in a bit more detail about it. And for those who haven't, what to expect. And we would love it if you have any questions or comments, then do put them in the chat, whether you're live or whether you watch later on the replay. Keely, over to you.
Thanks, Annie. Yeah, we just felt that it'd be really useful to talk about play therapy, just because probably as a foster carer or an adopter, you may have been recommended to take your child for play therapy or another therapy because there's quite a lot, and I just felt actually to talk about play therapy might give you a bit of a better understanding about what it is and who it might help, because all the therapies that you could be potentially offered, they're all helpful to somebody, but some therapies suit certain adults or children better at certain times of their life, depending on what stage, or not necessarily age, but just where they're at in life. So I thought I would just give you a bit of an understanding of what play therapy is. Um, so I mean, really, it's quite a new therapy, really, in the grand scheme of things. So its roots kind of go back, kind of very like early 19, in the 1900s, 1920, where there's people like Hermine, Hogg, Hellmouth, Hannah Freud, Melanie Klein, Margaret Launfeld, who are all psychotherapists, and they were using play in therapy. So often in adult psychotherapy, they would use like free association with words. So people are just talking, and the therapist would be picking up on certain things that are coming out in that conversation. So all these women were using play in that way. So often they were working with children. So they were seeing what the children were playing out, and they were picking up from that. So it had its roots there, kind of like 1920s, 1930s. And then people like Carl Rogers, who developed person-centered counselling, which is a talking therapy, but it's all about treating the client with unconditional positive regard. That means that not judging a person. It's about believing that the person has the potential to heal themselves. That we don't have to, as therapists, to kind of reconstruct them. We just kind of create the environment for the client to be able to kind of access that potential to heal themselves. That was Rogers is kind of coming on board about 1940s, and then Winnicott, who was a pediatrician, and then also became a psychotherapist as well, or a psychoanalyst. He also wrote a lot of books, and in his books, he talks a lot about play and attachment. So again, Bowlby's in there a wee bit, um, but also the power of play and how play can be used as a healing tool. And so all those people kind of come together, and then kind of like about late 60s, early 1970s, there's a lady called Virginia Axline, who really is kind of credited as the founder of play therapy. And so she wrote a book about play therapy called Play Therapy, and another book, which is actually this was my entry point into play therapy, a book called Dibs: In Search of Self. It's well, I thought it was, and I know other people have found it quite a page turner, and it's really just a big case study that's meant to
Mm.
be just of one boy, um, but quite a few people think it's probably a composite of a few children. But in that, she's really talking about the process of therapy, and this boy's process, and she's talking about like what she's doing and what she understands from the process. I mean, it's very different how I would do play therapy, because she had people like in a booth behind her filming and recording all the sessions, and she sat there with a clipboard, whereas
Yeah.
on a chair, which normally a play therapist wouldn't do that. She's founding it, you know, and people have grown and developed it since then.
Mm.
And I would say kind of like she's American, so by kind of like about like mid to late 80s, early 90s, play therapy's really kind of come across to the UK and is kind of gaining a lot of momentum by then. So it is still quite early in many ways, but then in some ways it has its roots go quite far back. But the actual practice of it is relatively early for a
Mm.
therapy. And so I just wanted actually, because I just as I was like researching this today, I just found a really good quote, and I've got to get it off my phone. That just really succinctly put it on. It was on the the British Association for Play Therapy website, and play therapy is currently defined as the dynamic process between child and play therapist, in which the child explores at his or her own pace and with his or her own agenda those issues, past and current, conscious and unconscious, that are affecting the child's life in the present. The child's inner resources are enabled by the therapeutic alliance to bring about growth and change. Play therapy is child centered, in which play is the primary medium and speech is the secondary medium. So, really, play therapy is it's looking at the current situation, but it's going back to the past, where other therapies, such as like cognitive behavioral therapy, are very much in the now. They're not going to go back and explore what
Mm.
happened or what the roots of this issue are. They're very much looking at when this happens, what do you do and what's the consequence, right? Whereas play therapy and some other therapies like person-centered or psychodynamic really are looking at the roots. Where does this go back and how is it being played out now? So there's this sense of like what's happening in what they call a person's internal world, so your emotional world, what's going on inside you, and
Mm.
how is that being acted out in your day to day. And so that's also sometimes where the link with attachment theory comes in as well, because
Mm.
it's about, when we're newborn babies and well, up to about the age of 3, really, our attachment style is being set. And that attachment style really gives a blueprint for how we kind of interact in relationships and how we view ourselves and the world. And so there's that kind of link kind of comes in
Mm.
as well. Um, so often when we're in play therapy, when we're working with a child, we're looking at what's happened in the past, what are they trying to show me now, what might this behavior mean, and also thinking about things like what's this child's experience and what will their attachment style be like, how are they seeing the world, how are they seeing themselves. And play really is the first language in play therapy. I mean, that sounds maybe an obvious statement to make, but really, a lot of a play therapist training is almost to kind of like understand play as a language and to think when they're in a room with a child, what is this child communicating to me through play? So, a
Mm,
lot of therapies are talking therapies, but things like play therapy, art therapy, music therapy, how
mm,
they start from a different point. And in play therapy, it's like, what is this child telling me through the play? And they might know what they're telling you, or they might not know. And that's where, in that quote, what they mean by the unconscious stuff,
mm,
is coming out. Um, and again, that's in our training, is to kind of, we often have like, you know, a background of, what this child's kind of experience. So we may have a history. And then sometimes, well, not sometimes, quite often, when you're in session with the children, you see stuff and you think, this feels like this
mm,
moment when they were 5,
mm,
and dad left or something, or
mhm,
this feels like, this moment, or sometimes just the way the children play, it may be like very chaotic, or they might be playing with in the sand tray and everything feels very full, and it really gives you a sense of maybe what the world felt like then or what it feels like now. And it's the play therapist training to kind of make sense of what the children are saying
mm,
through the play. So there's a lot of metaphor uh, in that as well, and a lot of symbolism. Um, so when you go into a play therapy session, a session's normally always 50 minutes and it's child centered. So a child's always told, this is your time to do whatever you want, as long as you don't hurt yourself, you don't hurt me, the therapist, and you don't break or damage things on purpose, or like splashing paint up the wall that can't be washed off,
yeah.
stuff like that. So and it's a confidential space. They're very aware of that, with a caveat of safeguarding concern. Um, and so then the child just plays out how they want. And typically in a room, there would be like lots of different things to play with. So there'd be like some art materials, there'd be puppets, there might be other role play um, things, like a till, food, dressing up clothes. Trying to think what else I've had in my room. Uh, all sorts of stuff, musical stuff. So I've had like xylophones and drums, much to the shame of other people. I've often worked in school, so sometimes it's been a bit noisy. But so musical stuff, and then there's sand trays, and they have like lots of, we call them figures, but really it's just small toys, like Happy Meal toys, or the little figures you can get, or Playmobil or Lego toys,
Mm,
anything that can kind of just go in the sand. Uh, and there's always 2 trays. So one's a tray of dry sand, one's a tray of wet sand, and they can add water to that. And it's just because sand works differently when it's wet and dry, and you can do different things with it. Is why we have 2 trays. Um, and then also like things like clay or Play-Doh as well. So there's lots of different things that the children can play in it, and it's really up to them to do what they want to do. It's child centered and it's very much non directive. So, unless a child's going to harm themselves or harm you, you're
mm,
not going to intervene in the play. And if you are role playing, you are really just following the lead of the child. You're literally asking, like, what shall I do next? Or, shall I, you know, shall I throw the bomb now? Or, things like that. So, um, it's very child led,
mm.
and lots of different things. So
How, I don't know whether this is the right time to ask, but I'm wondering how adopters and parents would sort of almost prepare a child for play therapy, or and what information would the therapist need when you were talking about them interpreting earlier experiences? Then I suppose
Mhm.
that needs to be communicated before the sessions. Are there things that people need to think about prior to a session?
Yeah, I mean, it can just be really useful, for a therapist to kind of have some kind of sense of history and where there may be particularly like difficult times in a child or the family's life, and how they're kind of presenting now. Um, and I think just in preparation, I mean, the therapist will be doing a lot, so there'll be like a lot of kind of work going in uh, to kind of helping the child understand what
Mm.
play therapy is, and even when you have sometimes it can still be a bit daunting for a child just to be said, hey, come and play in this room and do whatever you like, and they're a bit like, what? It's a bit like me being allowed in a chocolate factory and just saying have free reign. So, it can be quite overwhelming and a bit like, I don't even know where to start. But I think it's just about, the way we always explain it to the children is like, having time with a play therapist is just about having time just to think
Mm.
about things that are being difficult and to kind of explore thoughts and emotions and doing that using play. It's just trying to keep it quite simple, really. Uh, is to kind of describe it in that way. That play can be really useful to help us with things that are being difficult, maybe now or in the past. Um, it's just
Mm.
a good way to introduce it. But the therapist will be doing a lot of groundwork as well. So,
And is there a particular sort of time span when, um, how long it would last or?
I mean, it really depends on what the children attend play therapy for. So, some children attend for like relatively minor things. So, not that it feels minor, but things like bullying, or
Mm.
just something that's kind of a lack of self-esteem. Sometimes I've even had children who have attended because like maybe like they're struggling with bowel movements. And that has like a backstory to it. Now it could be like linked to like shame or repression of emotion or something. But
Mm.
um, and it can you can work yourself right up that kind of spectrum of kind of complexity as it was, or trauma and distress. You take, when children have like had parents who have divorced or died, right up to like your high level kind of child protection uh, concerns. And a lot of my work has been with children who have been removed from the family and placed in adoptive um,
Mm.
families or in foster care. So they're obviously bringing some quite big, complex kind of content with them. So it really depends. I think when I used to work with children, probably like average was about 16 to 20 sessions for something that had a bit of like
Mm.
um had some depth to it. But really complicated stuff, I could be going for quite a while. And actually, the longest I ever worked with a child, and it was over 2 periods of time. We'd done so much. This boy was in residential care, and then his dad had died, and his mum had died already. Uh, was
Mm.
80 sessions. But
Wow.
I would say that's like it that's not a common thing. That's probably
Mm.
quite rare to
Mm.
to do that many sessions. But it was because so much had happened to him beforehand, and then his dad had died, and he wanted to come back into session again. But I'd say normally about 16 to 20 sessions is probably an average. Some children need more.
Mm.
Things that can affect that are like how well a child is able to trust, and what I'd call a therapeutic level of trust, so they can really just kind of
Mm.
get in there and, really explore. And I guess really they're exposing themselves like in any intimate relationship. You're having to show parts of yourself that you may not want to show everybody.
Mm.
And so that can take a bit longer for some children to establish. Um,
Uh, are there some children who maybe aren't suited to play therapy or can't, you come across children who can't get much out of it?
Uh, I mean, I wouldn't say there's a particular category of children. I think it just depends on each individual
Mm.
child. So, I mean, there's certainly been times where I work with children and they really do need some therapy. But for them, I think sometimes we've done some work. I mean, it's like a few sessions in and they're a bit like, oh, this is just a bit too much for me. And they
Mm.
don't feel ready and they'll start like refusing to come to session. So maybe it's just not the right time for
No.
them. Although as adults, we're all like, "Oh, you definitely need something," "This would really help," and it would. But,
Mm,
the child's not ready yet. It just feels like too emotionally raw for them. Uh,
mm,
I mean, we would always work with children with ADHD or autism, and it can be helpful there, but sometimes not. It just really depends on
mm,
the the child really. But I would say there's nothing we can't really work with. Maybe as you kind of like veering into maybe kind of more psychiatric
mm,
conditions.
mm,
But then that would you'd be seeing a psychiatrist for treatment like
mm.
that. So
I think I'm just thinking about quite because my day job is working with care leavers, so young people aged sort of 16 to 18 as they end their time in care, and also 18 to 25 aftercare. And I think quite a few of them have had the opportunity of having therapy, but it's
mhm,
been the talking therapy.
mhm,
And a lot have said, I don't want to talk about it. I can't
mhm.
talk about it. And some kids certainly have struggled to articulate what's going on for them. So, think, do you think play therapy is good as a consequence of sort of children not being able to
Oh, yeah.
verbalize?
Uh-huh. I mean, quite often the teenagers do want to come and chat a bit more, but the younger children certainly, this is where play can be really useful because it can help a child just to kind of make sense of what's happened to them or what's happening to them just now without using words. And I'd say one area where play therapy is particularly helpful, and I've always found sound particularly powerful for this, is where a child has had um, trauma or a significant event happen in their lives before they had language. So when a child doesn't have
Mm,
language, everything feels quite abstract, and it's just a felt sense in the body. And
mm,
they, even as they get older, they can't look back on that and give it words because they never were able to structure it and make sense of it with language. It's just a felt sense. And so
mm,
things like sand, working with sand can be really good just for kind of resolving issues in that time of the life. And it's interesting to see. I mean, you're like, whoa, I remember, my very first time with a sand tray was on my training, and I thought, oh, well, this is all right. It's just some sand and a few toys. Now I just put a few toys in the sand, but it's actually really powerful. And actually, then we just did 10 minutes, and then the next time they said, right, you're going to do half an hour next time, and we're all shaking on our boots, like, oh my god, this happened in 10 minutes. What will happen in half an hour? um, so it can be really powerful, and I think it just, play is a more natural form of communication for a child, and the way that the therapist kind of creates the environment in the room and that relationship with the child just makes it conducive for them to be able to kind of explore stuff that's not necessarily always consciously on the mind, but kind of is digging a bit deeper into that unconscious
mhm,
process, and that can really alleviate a lot of kind of stress and anxiety from the children, and help them to make sense and to be able to kind of move on.
mm. Uh, I know I constantly am surprised at how powerful very simple things can be. Like you say, sort of you think playing in a sandpit is just playing and it's not that important, but actually it can be really powerful and initiating change, I guess.
Mhm. Particularly for children who have not had much opportunity to play either, or
Mm,
children who haven't had many or any positive relationships with adults, just to kind of be like held in regard in this relationship and be truly heard, uh, and there's a real compassion and a warmth in well, any therapy really, but I think particularly in play therapy for children, that can be a very new experience for them, and that can be life changing for them and themselves. Just to have someone who's not judging them or telling them what
Mm,
they should or shouldn't be doing, who just lets them be, and
mm,
accepts them for who they are, and will just listen to their story and not correct it.
mm,
And say, "Oh, no, that's not right," or, "Oh, well, you don't need to worry about that bit," just let
yeah, you're
them
doing
be.
that wrong.
Yeah, yeah, it's really powerful, and I've
Mm,
seen plenty of little, tough knots in my time, and they come into that therapeutic process, and what you see is paper thin children, they're incredibly fragile. They don't look it when they step out the door. That armor goes
mm,
back on, but
mm,
they can take that armor off in the therapy sessions, and you can really see the fragility of those
mm.
children. And it's a shame, because it's probably, some of those people when they were, who are now adults, who you're working with are the ones who are struggling because maybe they've not had opportunity
Mm.
for that in their experience in care.
I think it's quite a powerful thought, really, that that is that perhaps a lot of children's first experience from the care system, certainly, of having an adult who is not shouting at them or demanding of them or doing things that they don't want, um, but is actually holding that space for them to non-judgmentally, do what they want and listen to them in a really powerful way. And it makes you think that even if you can bring a little part of that into a relationship as a parent to a child,
Mhm,
it's going to be really powerful, because we don't listen to children in that way very much, do we?
mhm.
Unless we take that deliberate time.
Uh-huh. And sometimes we have to as parents, don't we? Kind of like take a lead and kind of say, "No, this is the best thing for
Mm,
you right now."
mm,
Like
yeah,
holding my hand when we cross the road, or
yeah.
certain things. It's not a good idea to go out at 10 o'clock at night, when you're 9 years old. So we have to kind of like make decisions for children sometimes for their safety, but sometimes particularly with professionals, we have our own
Mm,
agendas as well that sometimes override, uh, you know,
mm,
the child, and sometimes that's for the best, and sometimes it's not. It's for to meet another criteria or
yeah.
something. So yeah, it's nice when they can just be in that space where there is no agenda, and they choose what they want to bring to the sessions.
Mm. I'm thinking about times when I've supported foster carers and adopters, when the relationship with their child has got really fraught and fractured. Um, and there's an element with which when those situations and those relationships are struggling, they each stop seeing each other as they
Mhm,
really are, and sometimes the carers are very much, um, seeing the child as a problem, or they always do this or they always do that, and aren't seeing through to the child underneath. And I
mm.
just think that space sort of reinforces that they actually look at each other without blinkers and without preconceived ideas, just as they are as individuals.
That's right. When you get to that kind of stage, you really only seeing each other's behaviours. Like you say, you're not
Mm,
seeing the person, you're seeing the behaviours, and I think, one of the most important things about, play therapy is seeing all behaviour as communication. So, instead of seeing that behaviour as, like, problematic, if you switch that question and saying, "What are they trying to communicate through this
mm,
behaviour?" It can give you a very different kind of perspective, and, sometimes children's behavior, it can be very challenging, but that's a hard message that they're trying to tell you. So if it feels awful, it's because they feel awful. you know, they're really struggling with stuff and they need your
mm,
help, and it's not the time to kind of shut
mm,
down. It's actually the time to kind of open up more, and it's what
Mm,
I've started calling the strangest compliment is, when they can bring all that crap basically to you,
mm,
is because they trust you enough, to deal with
yeah.
it. If they didn't, they would just go and take it to school or somewhere else
Mm.
where they felt, someone could handle it. So, I mean, it doesn't feel very flattering, does it? But,
No, I remember, I think I was at work, but Evelyn was looking after our oldest, Essie, when she'd fairly recently been placed a couple of months before, and the social worker came to see how she was doing. And prior to that, she'd been really quiet, quite contained, because I think in her foster placement, she didn't get lots of attention, I don't think.
mhm,
Um, and in the midst of this visit, she started howling and shouting, and the social worker Evelyn was apologizing, and the social worker was saying, "Well, no, well, that's a really good sign, because she clearly feels happy, content, and able to be herself." So yeah,
uh-huh,
I totally understand where you're coming from.
yeah, they must have had Evelyn on her toes. Must have been, "Oh my god, what are they gonna think of me?"
Yeah.
Mhm,
So, how Um, I suppose, how is play therapy sort of structured? Does it? I know you've been talking about your experience in schools. Is that
mhm.
how people could access it through? Do you think?
Yeah, so
If
well, sometimes people access it through schools and sometimes just like oh, sorry, Yoni, it broke up then a minute.
Yeah, I can
Sorry,
hear
the
you.
chat just
Yeah,
broke up a minute. You were asking about how it can be accessed.
yeah.
Um, yeah, so yeah, quite often now, some schools will have access to a play therapist who would come and visit the school. Um, I've done that myself on a freelance basis, through another organisation, or as an organisation who's gone like into the school and offer like a whole, full on counselling service.
Mm,
Um, but there are other charities and organisations around, or individuals. If you
mm,
went onto the BAPT website, that's the
mhm,
British Association of Play Therapists.
right,
They have a register, and you would also find some play therapists probably through BACP, the British Association of Counsellors and Psychotherapists as well. So you might find people to your area, or even a Google search. If you just typed in your
mm,
local area and play therapy, then individual like private practitioners or a local organisation um, should pop up. So
right.
there's a few
And
ways of
I'm thinking that the Adoption Support Fund in the UK will also support adopters to access play therapies, a variety of different kinds of therapies, which I'm presuming would include play therapy. I think the reviews recently the government did of the support funds was that perhaps it was too much tailored towards emergencies and late stage support, rather than
Mhm,
and that people didn't recognize or realize that they could actually do it quite early on in the adoption. So
mhm,
that's also a possibility, if you Google Adoption Support Fund, or talk to the local authority.
mhm,
I mean, I think that's been really, really interesting. And I suppose it leads quite nicely into the webinar that we're doing on Thursday. And that's called Five Ways to Increase Adoption for Attachment for Your Adopted Child. Do you want to say a little bit about the content of the course?
Yeah, yeah. It's just as Johnny said, it's just about thinking about ways just to increase your bond with your child and kind of strengthen your relationship. And what Yoni and I think we're starting to pride ourselves on that, aren't we, Yoni? That like what we're trying to do is just make things simple,
Yeah.
uh, and just make it kind of something that you can like factor into your day without it having to be like something else you've got to try and squeeze into the day. And so we're just going to be looking at they're not even all techniques really, but maybe some principles, and a few. I guess there's just ways of being playful that can really just help you just to kind of really develop that relationship, increase your child's sense of worth and place in the family, and just improve your bond together. It's 8 o'clock on Wednesday, isn't it? So we're going to be gentle.
7:30.
7:30, sorry.
Yeah,
It's
on
7:30,
Thursday.
so we'll be gentle with everyone,
Yeah.
but it will be informative, and there's just a lot to kind of take away from it without feeling like it's not like you can think, right, I'm going to start this new diet tomorrow, and I'm going to have to do this, and this. The things that can be very easily integrated into your day that you could start on the Thursday morning, on the Friday morning. So it's webinars Thursday.
Brilliant. That's been really interesting, Keely, as always. Thank you. Thank you
Sure.
for your time. I'd love to hear comments and thoughts if you have watched either live, you're watching live, or on the replay. Do put it in the comments box, and we will see you in 2 weeks. Not Can't even remember what we're talking about in a couple of weeks, but I'm sure it's going to be good.
Oh, but
And
it's just
hopefully see you next week in the webinar. So thanks for your time.
Mhm.
Take care.
Thanks.
Bye.
Really